Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world.
And this one is quite the journey.
It really is. The source material we're tackling today is incredibly dense, but, it offers a lens for understanding our current technological landscape that you just rarely see anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me be clear right out of the gate here.
Yeah.
This deep dive is a systems-level institutional analysis. This is not a book review.
Right. We're not doing a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Exactly. We are not here to give a star rating to a piece of literature, nor are we here to just summarize chapters. Instead, we use specific texts as entry points. For us, identity equals systems. We want to understand the invisible architectures that govern our behavior, our thoughts, and, our societies.
The structures we don't even realize we're living inside of.
Yeah. And the book serving as today's entry point is an absolute classic. It was published way back in 1967, and it's called The Medium is the Massage by Marshall McLuhan and Quentin Fiore, and produced by Jerome Agel.
And yes, you heard that correctly. It is not message, but massage.
We will definitely get into exactly why that is, but the sheer visual and intellectual impact of this collaborative project is our roadmap for today.
So the core premise we are identifying today, the primary system we're going to unpack, is this concept of media environments as structuring forces.
Right.
We are going to explore how these media environments actually shape human cognition, how they shape human identity, and how they dictate social relations completely and utterly independently of specific content.
Which is a huge claim.
It's a radical proposition,
Yeah.
especially because we are so trained to only look at the content. We look at what a television show is about, or what an email says, or what a social media post is arguing.
We're obsessed with the surface.
Exactly. And McLuhan and Fiore are demanding that we look at the television itself, the computer itself, the smartphone itself as the actual message. They are the invisible environments we're about to decode.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure you, listening to this right now, have the right mental image.
To set the stage for you as we delve into this, imagine the backdrop for today's deep dive as a shifting dynamic collage. Picture the heavy, clanking, mechanical printing presses of the Industrial Revolution slowly morphing and dissolving into the silent, glowing, infinite server farms of the modern era.
That transition from the mechanical to the electrical, that is the invisible environment we're analyzing today. Let's jump right into the core analysis and start with the architecture of perception, like the very design of how we interface with the world.
To begin with design, we really have to break down the central axiom that McLuhan presents. He states quite clearly that the medium or process of our time, which he identifies as electric technology, is reshaping and restructuring patterns of social interdependence.
He goes on to say it is forcing us to reconsider and reevaluate practically every thought, every action, and every institution we formerly took for granted.
Because society is shaped by the nature of media, not the content of the communication.
Wait, let me pause this right here and push back on this a little bit, because this is a massive claim.
Go for it.
Is he really arguing that content doesn't matter at all? If someone uses a smartphone to read a dense, meticulously researched history book versus doom-scrolling a highly polarized social media feed for 3 hours, surely the content makes a fundamental difference to that person's intellectual diet.
It's a fair question.
It just feels counterintuitive to say the content is entirely irrelevant.
It does feel counterintuitive, and honestly, it's the most common friction point when encountering this framework. But the text isn't arguing that content has zero impact on a conscious, momentary level.
Right. Obviously, you learn facts from a history book.
Exactly. If you read a history book, you learn history. If you watch a sitcom, you laugh. But systems-level analysis requires zooming out. The argument is that the structural impact of the medium entirely eclipses the surface-level impact of the content over time.
Over time being the key phrase there.
Yeah. Even if you are reading that dense history book on your smartphone, you are still engaging with a backlit screen that strains your eyes differently than paper. You are still holding a device that connects you instantaneously to a global network.
Meaning the potential for an interruption is always there.
Always. A notification, a text, a news alert is ever present. The environment of the smartphone trains your brain to expect hyperconnectivity, rapid switching, and shallow, wide-ranging attention.
Regardless of whether the specific text you happen to have open is a profound piece of literature or, a meme.
Precisely. Society is shaped more by the nature of the media by which people communicate than by whatever it is they are actually saying to each other. The medium massages your brain into a new configuration.
Let's ground that distinction between the print age and the electric age to make the historical shift clearer. The source points out that before the phonetic alphabet came along, in pre-alphabet societies, the ear was the dominant organ of sensory and social orientation.
The quote they use is, "Hearing was believing."
Right. And if you think about it, sound is inherently immersive. It surrounds you from all directions simultaneously. You can't easily shut off your ears the way you can just close your eyes.
In an oral culture, you're part of a tribe, sitting around a fire, listening to a storyteller. Everyone hears the same thing at the exact same time.
You are deeply, inextricably embedded in your community because the medium of the spoken word requires physical proximity and shared synchronous experience.
But then the alphabet and print technology come along, and they completely disrupt that tribal acoustic space. The text explicitly states that print technology fostered and encouraged a fragmenting process, a process of specialism and of detachment.
The psychological shift that occurs here just cannot be overstated. The book points out that print technology essentially created the concept of the public.
And the public, as defined in this source, consists of separate individuals walking around with separate, fixed points of view.
Because when you read a book, you're doing so in isolation. You retreat into your own mind. You follow a sequential, linear line of text from left to right, line by line, page by page.
This physical and mechanical act trains the brain to think sequentially, to categorize, to separate cause from effect. It literally creates the rational, detached, individual ego.
You can take a book anywhere. You don't need the tribe to consume the information.
And the visual layout of McLuhan's book itself plays with this concept continuously. It shows how words and their meanings predispose a child to think and act automatically in certain fragmented ways.
The alphabet is a technology absorbed unconsciously, by osmosis, so to speak, by the very young, wiring their brains for specialization and detachment before they even understand what a medium is.
To illustrate this linear, print-based rationality, the source uses a brilliant analogy from literature. There's a page in the book that features a wonderful, slightly chaotic illustration of the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland yelling at Alice.
Oh, I love this part.
The text quotes the king saying, "Now for the evidence," and then the sentence. But the queen shouts, "No, first the sentence and then the evidence."
And Alice cries out, "Nonsense." The idea of having the sentence first.
The source uses this to show how rationality and logic came to depend on the presentation of connected sequential facts. Print demands linear logic.
You must have the evidence, step by step, one piece of data following another, before you reach the conclusion or the sentence.
Alice is a child of the print age. She expects linear, mechanical order. But the Queen of Hearts is operating on a different wavelength, an almost electric, immediate wavelength, where the effect the sentence happens instantly, completely overriding linear progression.
Electric media upends the linear logic of print. It doesn't care about step 1, step 2, step 3. It drops the entire environment on your head all at once.
Which brings us to the profound concept of sensory reorganization. And this requires defining a bit of the terminology used in the text. We really need to talk about sensory ratio.
Let's do it.
McLuhan is arguing that media are not just external tools we hold in our hands, like a hammer. He defines electric circuitry as an extension of the central nervous system.
Wow.
When you introduce a new medium, you alter the entire environment. And by altering the environment, you evoke unique ratios of sense perceptions.
Let's clarify that term, sensory ratios, because it sounds quite academic. You're saying that when we look at a screen all day, our visual sense is so overstimulated, and perhaps our auditory or tactile senses are understimulated, that it literally changes the neurological balance of how we process information.
Yeah.
The physical wiring of the brain shifts to accommodate the dominant medium.
That is the exact argument. The text explicitly states, the extension of any one sense alters the way we think and act, the way we perceive the world. When these ratios change, men change.
Think about the physical implications of this. We are talking about human biology, human neurology, adapting to an environmental shift caused by technology.
Yeah.
If you spend 8 hours a day navigating a three-dimensional physical landscape, your sensory ratio is balanced across sight, sound, spatial awareness, and touch.
Right.
But if you spend those same 8 hours staring at a flat, glowing, two-dimensional screen where vast amounts of information are flashing at you simultaneously, your visual cortex is hyperextended while your other senses are essentially amputated.
The ratio shifts. And because your perception of reality relies entirely on how your senses process data, a shift in that ratio means you literally inhabit a different reality than someone from the print age.
The visuals in the book hammer this home perfectly. There is this stark, minimalist image of a person's head, heavily shadowed, with a hand cupped around the ear, and the text just says, dot, 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 the massage.
It's asking us to realize how we are being worked over physically and psychologically.
And then there are these graphics, massive, heavy black arrows. One graphic just shows a single thick black arrow pointing to the right, representing that linear single direction print logic. You follow the line, you follow the argument, you stay on track.
But a few pages later, there's a graphic of arrows exploding outward in every single direction from a central white circle.
That exploding graphic is the electric age. It is not linear. It is characterized by simultaneity and total involvement. It hits you from all sides at once, just like the Queen of Hearts delivering the sentence before the evidence.
Electric technology is an environment you inhabit, not a tool you pick up and put down.
That visual of the exploding arrows really gets to the heart of why this current technological moment feels so overwhelming to so many people. It's not just a different way of reading or communicating, it's an aggressive expansion into our mental space.
Why does this electric media seem to take over everything it touches? Why do these media systems expand so aggressively?
We have to map out the engine of expansion, the incentive architecture of these systems. The text provides a chillingly straightforward answer to your question. It says, all media work us over completely.
They don't politely ask for our attention. They restructure our entire way of being.
They entrench themselves because they operate on a level below our conscious defense mechanisms. As we noted earlier, they are absorbed by the young by osmosis. When an environment is all you've ever known, you don't question it. You just adapt your incentive structures to survive within it.
And how do those incentive structures change in the electric age? We shift from the rewards of delayed gratification and linear logic, which were the hallmarks of reading a book or studying a trade over years, to the rewards of immediacy, blistering speed, and intense emotional participation.
Let's look at what the text says about the audience itself. In the print age, we had the public, that consensus of separate, distinct viewpoints, rationally debating ideas in a town square or through newspaper editorials.
But the text boldly declares, the public is finished.
Instead, we have the mass audience. And here is the critical shift in the incentive architecture. The mass audience is now used as a creative, participating force rather than just passive consumers given pre-packaged parcels of entertainment.
You look at something like TikTok or modern social media algorithms today, and it is the absolute realization of this 1967 prediction.
Completely. The users aren't just watching, they're creating the trends, stitching the videos, reacting in real time.
The audience is the product, the labor force, and the consumer, all rolled into one massive, participating nervous system.
The system rewards participation with dopamine, with visibility, creating an endless loop of expansion.
If the very nature of the audience and the human sensorium is changed, we must examine how legacy institutions, which were painstakingly built during the print age, attempt to survive.
The short answer is, they struggle immensely. They are forced to adapt their structures to fit the dominant medium, often clumsily. Let's look at politics. The source observes that politics offers yesterday's answers to today's questions.
Our political institutions, Congresses, parliaments, the judicial system, they were designed for the slow, deliberative, linear process of print.
Written bills, prolonged floor debates, representative democracy, where a delegate goes away to a capital city to think and vote on your behalf.
Those are all print-era technologies of social coordination. They rely on the detachment and specialized thinking of the alphabet.
But we are now governed by the multi-directional arrows of instant electric speeds. We have politicians attempting to govern via instant reaction, forced to respond to global crises within minutes on social media.
The text points out that a new form of politics is emerging in ways we haven't yet noticed, simply because our institutions are reacting too slowly to the medium. The deliberative process is fundamentally incompatible with the electric demand for instant participation.
You see this struggle so vividly in the realm of education, too. The book has this brilliant visual juxtaposition that I think anyone who has sat in a classroom recently will feel in their bones.
Oh, the hallway image?
Yeah. On one page, there's a cartoon of students walking down a rigid, perfectly straight school hallway. They are moving in a linear path, passing identical closed doorways, completely orderly. It represents the linear curriculum.
First grade, then second grade. You learn addition, then you learn subtraction. You study ancient history, then you study modern history. It is step by step, categorized, and compartmentalized.
But on the facing page, there's a photograph of curving, dynamic railway tracks stretching off into the distance, representing continuous, overwhelming speed and exposure.
And underneath all this is a fantastic quote. It isn't that I don't like current events. There have just been so many of them lately.
Education used to be about isolating a student from the chaotic world to give them linear, structured facts in a quiet room. Now, the electric environment floods that student with the entire world instantly.
A kid sitting in a classroom with a smartphone has access to a limitless, unstructured ocean of information, real-time war footage, global cultural trends, and an infinite scroll of data.
Education is forced to transform from that linear curriculum into a frantic process of managing continuous exposure to the now.
The school hallway cannot contain the speed of the railway tracks. The institution of the school is cracking under the pressure of the electric environment.
While politics and education lag behind, caught in their print-era architectures and struggling with this crisis of relevance, commerce adapts much more rapidly. The text makes a brief but incredibly telling observation. Big business has learned to tap the science fiction writer.
Why would a multinational corporation hire a science fiction writer in 1967?
Because commerce understands that survival in an electric age depends on anticipating the environment, not just reacting to it.
Yeah.
They realize that the environments are shifting so rapidly and the sensory ratios are being rewritten so thoroughly that they need visionaries to map out the potential scenarios of human behavior.
Commerce adapts to the speed and total involvement of the electric age far faster than governance or traditional education, because its core incentive is survival through constant immediate capitalization on the new sensory ratios.
If the mass audience wants to be a creative participating force, commerce will build the platforms to monetize that participation long before the government figures out how to regulate it.
We've designed this architecture of perception, and we set this aggressive engine of expansion into motion. Where does it lead? What is the predictable structural fallout of wiring the entire planet together?
This is where we look at the outcomes of the system. The most profound outcome described in the text is the collapse of geographic distance. We've all heard the phrase global village, but it originates right here in this framework.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that global village, because it is often misunderstood as simply meaning we can talk to people far away.
The text describes how television, as a prime example of electric technology at the time, completes the cycle of the human sensorium. It provides us with an omnipresent ear and the moving eye.
We have essentially abolished the specialized, detached nature of writing.
In television, and by extension the modern internet, the text argues there is an extension of the sense of active exploratory touch, which involves all the senses simultaneously. It is not just about passively seeing an image, it is about total emotional and psychological participation.
This total involvement over vast distances means that what happens on the other side of the planet is experienced with the same visceral immediacy as what happens in your own living room. Geography is no longer a buffer.
A crisis 10,000 miles away triggers the same neurological stress response as a crisis next door.
The sheer speed of this transition caught even the greatest visionaries off guard. There's this fascinating historical irony highlighted in the source. They point out that Jules Verne, one of the most imaginative science fiction writers in history, a man who predicted submarines, space travel, and mechanical wonders, completely failed to predict television or the instantaneous nature of electric media.
The text includes a drawing from an old French illustration titled In the 29th Century, showing a man at a complicated mechanical desk talking to a screen. But Verne couldn't envisage the sheer speed with which electric technology would produce informational media.
He rashly predicted that television wouldn't be invented until the 29th century. He was bound by the mechanistic linear timeline of the industrial print age.
He could imagine faster trains, bigger gears, more elaborate mechanics, a linear progression of what already existed. He couldn't foresee the exponential instant nature of electric circuitry because it represented a complete break from the linear timeline he was accustomed to.
Now here's where it gets really interesting and a little terrifying. The fallout isn't just about connecting the world and overcoming distance. It is about the complete and utter erosion of privacy.
The text outlines a serious dilemma between our claim to privacy and the community's need to know. It says that the older traditional ideas of private, isolated thoughts and actions, which were the patterns of mechanistic technologies and the print age, are very seriously threatened by new methods of instantaneous electric information retrieval.
I have to share something that perfectly encapsulates this. Just last week, I was on a jog, My knees started acting up. I didn't say anything out loud. I didn't search for anything on my phone. I just thought to myself, man, my knees are getting bad. Maybe I need new shoes. I get home, open up a social media app, and the very first 3 ads are for orthotic running shoes and knee braces.
That is wild.
It feels like the medium is literally reading my biometric data or anticipating my needs before I even articulate them.
That anecdote is the perfect modern realization of what McLuhan warned about. The accuracy of their prediction here is staggering. They introduced the concept of the electrically computerized dossier bank.
The dossier bank.
They describe the system as that one big gossip column that is unforgiving, unforgetful, and from which there is no redemption, no erasure of early mistakes.
The source explicitly warns of devices for universal, tyrannical, womb-to-tomb surveillance.
To underscore this point, there's a chilling page in the book that simply shows a large, smudged fingerprint next to text that mimics a paranoid interrogation.
Yep.
Ever contemplated suicide? Are you now, or have you ever been? Are you aware of the fact?
It captures the intrusive, totalizing nature of the electric environment. When you are totally connected, you are totally exposed.
Your running shoe ads are a product of that dossier bank. A massive algorithmic aggregation of your location data, your pace, your demographic, and thousands of invisible data points cross-referenced instantly.
Think about that phrasing. Womb-to-tomb surveillance. We are talking about constant connectivity producing a state of massive collective awareness. We can organize social movements in an afternoon. We have instant access to the sum of human knowledge. That's the collective awareness. But simultaneously, it generates immense collective vulnerability.
If the medium is an extension of your central nervous system, then a global medium means your nervous system is plugged into a planetary grid.
You feel the anxieties of the entire world, and the entire world has access to your data, your habits, your early mistakes.
The dossier bank never forgets because electric memory is permanent, endlessly replicable, and instantly retrievable. We see this today with cancel culture or the unearthing of decade-old digital footprints.
The isolation that print provided, the ability to close your front door, draw the curtains, and be truly alone with your unrecorded thoughts, is eradicated by the omnipresent ear and moving eye.
This leads us to perhaps the most insidious part of this entire system, the invisible cage. How do we find ourselves in this state of universal surveillance, sensory overload, and algorithmic prediction without actively revolting against it every single day?
We need to map the feedback loops and institutional reinforcements that keep the system running so smoothly.
The fundamental reason is the invisibility of environments. The text explains that the ground rules, the pervasive structure, and the overall patterns of environments elude easy perception.
The massage of the medium is so constant, so total, that it becomes like water to a swimming fish. The fish doesn't know what water is because it has never experienced anything else. It is the absolute baseline of reality.
Increased immersion in the medium normalizes the surveillance. If everyone has a computerized dossier bank, if every single person you know is on the same social network, sharing their lives, trading their privacy for convenience, it no longer feels tyrannical. It just feels like living in modern society.
Furthermore, the incredible acceleration of the medium reduces our reflective distance. Because the electric age is characterized by instant speed and simultaneity, you literally do not have the time to step back and analyze what is happening to you.
The linear, sequential time required for deep philosophical reflection is abolished by the next notification, the next breaking news alert, the next viral trend. The environment reinforces itself simply by moving too fast to be effectively critiqued by the masses.
So if the environment is invisible and moving too fast to analyze, how do we ever break out of this loop? How do we see the water?
The source offers a very specific solution, the concept of the anti-environment. The text states that anti-environments or counter-situations are made by artists. These creations provide the means of direct attention and enable us to see and understand the environment more clearly.
The artist's role in society is not just to paint a pretty picture or write a pleasing melody. The artist's role is to create a juxtaposition that jars our shifted sensory ratios, forcing us to step outside the normalized flow of the electric medium and observe the invisible conditioning.
The interplay between the old and the new environments creates confusion, but it is in that precise moment of confusion and friction that the artist can reveal the structure of the cage.
But even when we try to look at these new environments, even when an artist or a critic points them out, we fall into a massive cognitive trap. The text calls this the rearview mirror, and this might be the most crucial concept for understanding our current struggles with technology.
We have this deeply embedded habit of regarding all new phenomena from a fixed point of view. We speak of gaining perspective, But the book argues that this psychological process of gaining perspective derives unconsciously from print technology.
It assumes a fixed, static individual looking at a fixed, static object from a comfortable distance. But in the electric age, there is no distance, and absolutely everything is in motion.
So when we look at new media, we almost exclusively evaluate them using the criteria of the old media. We look at the present through a rearview mirror. We assume we are marching boldly forward into the future, when in reality, we are backing into it, our eyes rigidly fixed on what has already passed.
Think about how we struggle to regulate artificial intelligence right now. We are trying to apply copyright laws and intellectual property frameworks that were literally designed for the printing press concepts of singular authorship, fixed copies, linear distribution to neural networks that train on billions of data points instantaneously and generate novel outputs.
We are looking at a sentient-seeming electric environment through the rearview mirror of 18th century print law. It's like trying to regulate a nuclear reactor using the safety guidelines of a steam engine.
Another historical example of the rearview mirror that the text points toward is how we name early technologies. When the automobile was invented, we called it a horseless carriage.
We couldn't conceive of it as a fundamentally new mode of transportation that would redesign cities. We could only understand it in relation to the horse it replaced. When radio emerged, it was wireless telegraphy.
When the internet first became mainstream, we called it the information superhighway, trying to map it onto the industrial infrastructure of roads and cars. Or we viewed it as a giant library, a print metaphor. We thought we were just putting books on screens.
We didn't realize we were building an omnipresent, interconnected central nervous system that would fundamentally alter human identity. This reliance on the rearview mirror explains the persistence of the system and the immense cost of reversal.
That brings up a terrifying question. Why do these media systems feel so inevitable? Why can't we just unplug? I think about this whenever I accidentally leave my phone at home. You walk out the door, get halfway down the street, pat your pocket, and it's empty.
Yep, the panic.
Your heart literally drops into your stomach. You feel a spike of genuine physiological panic. It's not just, oh darn, I can't check my email. It feels like a phantom limb sensation. A piece of your nervous system is missing and your brain is sounding an alarm.
Yeah.
Why are we so deeply bound to this?
We must analyze the infrastructural lock-in. Once a society reorganizes its entire social, political, and economic structure around a dominant medium, reversing it becomes structurally costly, often catastrophically so. The text references a quote by the philosopher A.N. Whitehead. The major advances in civilization are processes that all but wreck the societies in which they occur.
That quote is laid out so dramatically in the book, spanning across the pages in huge, bold, aggressive text. The major advances in civilization are processes that all but wreck the societies in which they occur. It's a sobering thought that innovation is inherently destructive to the existing social fabric.
To illustrate this infrastructural lock-in, the text uses a historical analogy that we touched on earlier with the horseless carriage, the railway. The railway didn't just move coal faster from point A to point B, it radically altered personal outlooks and patterns of social interdependence. It bred and nurtured the American dream of westward expansion. It created totally new urban environments, suburbs, and family dynamics.
Imagine trying to uninvent the railway in 1910. You couldn't just pass a law and pull up the tracks. The entire architecture of the nation, the food supply chains, the economy, the very concept of a unified country depended on it. Pulling up the tracks would mean starving cities and collapsing the society.
And the electric technology of the modern age is doing the exact same thing, but on a much deeper neurological level. It is altering our central nervous systems and our collective psychology. Because the transactions of the information age are managed electrically. Our banking, our supply chains, our power grids, our communication society is completely existentially dependent on this continuous flow.
The text concludes its thought on this by stating, now we have to adjust, not to invent. We have to find the environments in which it will be possible to live with our new inventions. Reversal is not an option without complete societal collapse.
A massive solar flare or a Carrington event that wiped out our electrical grids wouldn't just be an inconvenience. It would be an apocalyptic reversion to an incompatible era. The economic dependence, the cultural adaptation, the very formation of our identities are so thoroughly wrapped up in the electric medium that the cost of reversal is unimaginable. We are locked in.
Let's take all of this, everything we've discussed from this 1967 text, and bring it fully into the nested systems of our present day. Let's look at the interconnection. If we synthesize the source material's predictions, the computerized dossier banks, the womb-to-tomb surveillance, and the mass audience as a creative participating force, what do we get? We get the precise blueprint for our entire modern world.
If we map these 1967 concepts onto today's structural realities, we see the exact evolution McLuhan predicted, scaled up to a degree even he might have found terrifying. The computerized dossier banks are no longer hypothetical warnings. They are the foundation of platform capitalism.
The surveillance is not a bug. It is the entire business model. Our digital footprints, tracked and monetized by massive tech corporations and data brokers, are the ultimate expression of the gossip column that is unforgiving and unforgetful.
The mass audience as a creative participating force is the entire user-generated content model of modern social media. We are not just watching the screen, we are providing the content for the screen, training the algorithms, and constantly massaging the medium as it massages us.
Look at digital education and the attention markets. Education has moved from the linear school hallway to algorithmic mediation. Algorithms now dictate what information you are exposed to, maximizing engagement through emotional intensity and outrage, the exact electric incentives we discussed earlier.
The attention markets thrive because electric circuitry extends our nervous systems globally, making us hypersensitive to every ping, every notification, every manufactured outrage cycle.
What we hope you, listening to this, take away from this journey is absolute structural clarity. Media are not neutral channels for content. Your smartphone is not an empty box that just delivers neutral information for you to rationally evaluate.
The algorithms are not neutral sorting tools organizing data. They are the environmental conditions that dictate how meaning is even possible. They shape your attention span, your interpersonal relationships, your political beliefs, and your fundamental perception of reality.
Which brings us to the crux of this entire deep dive.
This raises the most important question of all, and I want to ask you, the listener, directly. What is the crisis in perception here?
To answer analytically, the crisis is the persistent, stubborn assumption that content is primary and that media are just neutral containers. That is the fundamental misperception driving so much of our societal confusion.
Service interpretation focuses entirely on the messages we read, the videos we watch, or the political bias of a news article. We argue endlessly about the specific content of a post, completely missing the larger picture.
Systems-level analysis reveals that the obscured structural layer, the truly powerful force, is the medium itself. It is the invisible environmental conditioning that shapes human cognition and society.
The crisis in perception is our collective failure to see the water we are swimming in. We are so mesmerized by the content, the shadows dancing on the cave wall, that we fail to notice the architecture of the cave itself, the machinery projecting the light, and how it is fundamentally reorganizing our sensory ratios and social interdependence.
Until we perceive the medium as the total environment, we remain oblivious to how we're being worked over completely. That structural clarity is incredibly powerful, and it leaves us with one final provocative thought to mull over as we wrap up today's deep dive.
If the electric age, as defined in 1967, extended our central nervous system globally, making us deeply interconnected and hyper-vulnerable to womb-to-tomb surveillance, what happens when the next medium arrives?
What happens when the next environment, perhaps immersive virtual realities or advanced neural interfaces or artificial intelligence, doesn't just connect our nervous systems, but actively attempts to simulate them or even bypass them entirely? What happens to human identity when the medium itself can think? I'll leave you to explore that on your own.
Crisis in perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind crisis in perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer link in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.